Welcome, everybody, to the Smart Guy Podcast. My name is CJ the Smart Guy, and this episode is entitled My Second Full Marathon, Nearly 20 Years of Unhealed Trauma. So, for those that don't know, I run with the run group called We Off the Couch, based in Richmond, Virginia. It's a Black-owned, very diverse run group. So, big shout outs to Anthony Clary, also known as Rock. And he created this when he was diagnosed as pre-diabetic during COVID and just started running with himself. Originally it was called Run with Rock. And as people started running with him and it just grew and grew and grew, now we've got well over 1,000 people running. And this last race, the Richmond Marathon on November 16th, 2024, we had over 200 people run with We Off the Couch, whether it was an 8K, half marathon, or full marathon. So big shout outs to We Off the Couch, because if it wasn't for them, chances are I wouldn't have ran my first marathon, and I definitely wouldn't have run a second marathon. I was inspired by a lady named Ashley last year to run my first full marathon, because at the time I had never seen a Black girl run a marathon. Now that I've gotten into the community more, I see it everywhere. But at that time I had never seen it. So I think access and visibility of, different communities is very, very important. And I think We Off the Couch does that very, very, very well. It's very diverse. We have Black, white, Hispanic, Indian. We have everything. And so I think that that's just a huge thing, because we run through communities, suburbs, hoods, government areas, like just everywhere, downtowns. Like we just run everywhere, country places, trails. We just see all of Richmond, because one thing that Rock said was that he grew up right next to the river and never even knew that it was there. And so having access, having visibility to these places is important. Just like I think having visibility to people who run of all shades, all colors is important. I just thought the only Black people that ran were like Africans, because that's all you see on the TV is the Africans coming in first, Kenyans, kicking behind. You never see Black Americans there. So that's just what I thought. So big shout outs to We Off the Couch. Just finished my second marathon. And even though I'm disappointed in my time, I'm very much at peace with myself. So let me give you some background. So my time was like 6 hours, 48 minutes. I was trying to do 4 hours and 30 minutes with a grace period of up to 5 hours. However, I knew after the first 10 miles that was not going to happen. And the way I see it, it was because of sleep. I've been struggling to sleep ever since October 11th, 2024. And the marathon was November 16th, 2024. So over a month, outside of 2 nights of good sleep, I haven't had good sleep for a month, over a month, averaging maybe 3 to 5 hours a night. And if you're trying to run a marathon, sleep is important. Recovery is important, especially since I was still, doing two or three workouts a day, and not getting any sleep. Like, I'm surprised my body hasn't broken down. I'm grateful that it hasn't. I'm grateful I was able to finish. So even though I was disappointed in the time, I understood. Now, why did I not get enough sleep? What's going on in my life? So October 11th, that was the day that Kamala came out with her plan for Black men in the crypto space, and it sent shockwaves to everybody. There's going to be another episode called Why Kamala Lost. However, briefly, I'll go through the breakdown. So Black men have been instrumental in this crypto space. We have people like Reggie Middleton, who actually created DeFi, decentralized finance, as a way to get out of the banking system, because the banking system has historically oppressed us, whether it's through crazy bank fees, or not giving us loans, or increasing the interest simply because you're Black, or just all types of stuff that the banks have done, nefarious activities. And it seems as though whenever the banks do something wrong, they get bailed out. 08, 09, 2020 or 2023. They just keep getting bailed out. No real consequences are done, and they just oppress us. And so Reggie Middleton created something called DeFi, decentralized finance, where you can exchange different cryptocurrencies without a middleman that controls it. And all these crypto companies, a lot of retail users, they all use this technology. However, he has not been getting paid for it. And so, there's lawsuits going out with him versus Coinbase, and I just want him to get paid. And so when this talking point came out about protecting Black men from digital assets, it created a shockwave because it was like black men never asked to be protected from digital assets. More than anything, we just want to have great policy and have the policy enforced. Reggie Middleton should be getting paid for his patents, period. And so black men were like, we never asked for this. She didn't listen to us. And a lot of the black women who had been raising money for her and had been striving for her to get in office, even if her stance on crypto wasn't necessarily cemented, there was no real foundation, they thought that this election, they didn't really have a choice to be one issue voters because they had women's rights at stake. They had freedoms at stake. And I understand that. So when it became protect black men from this, they felt like they weren't included. So the black women felt excluded. The black men felt like, hey, you didn't listen to us. And so it appears that she was receiving information from Joe Biden or from Elizabeth Warren and not Cory Booker, a black man in Senate who actually understands digital assets. And so all that to say is October 11th, my phone absolutely blew up because everybody felt some type of way about this stance for an election, and everybody was upset, and it created a lot of tension. Next day I actually ran with We Off the Couch, ran I think like 10 miles, something like that, 10 or 15, I don't remember. But I ran, trained, and I had to fly out to California for my mom's birthday, her 60th birthday. So shout outs to moms. So that night I flew out, and when I got there, I got to see my Aunt Pat. Now my Aunt Pat, it was very obvious that she was not in a good place. She had a septic infection from the hospital. I don't know why we go to hospitals instead of bringing doctors that we know and love to the house, nurses that we know in real life. I don't understand, but it's above my pay grade. And so my aunt, you could tell that she was really, really struggling. She understood what we were saying, but she couldn't really respond at all. And so it was sad to see her like that. She helped raise me. Like my mom was pregnant a lot. And so if my mom was pregnant, my Aunt Pat would be there. And she was always the fun aunt. So she allowed me to have a whole stick of gum versus only a half a stick of gum, things of that nature. She always had the really nice cars, Infinities, and like she would drive fast, and it was just always fun. Aunt Pat was a whole vibe ever since I was young. And then she had 2 grandkids, Courtney and Jasmine, that I used to always look after. And so, I love my Aunt Pat dearly. She taught me a lot about business ownership and owning versus working for somebody else. And so to see her like that bothered me. And so the 11th, we had the crypto space blowing up. The 12th, I ran miles. I flew. Then I saw my aunt in a very, sad space. And then on the 13th was my mom's birthday party. So I had to, make sure that it looked good, setting things up. I had to make sure I bought things. So I was like running back and forth trying to make sure that my mom's party was nice. It went fantastic. She had friends from all over the world come through. She had a lot of support. I had friends that came out. Shout outs to Allie and her mom. We just had so much love for my mom. And it's crazy because my mom was saying that was her first birthday party ever in her life. And it was at her 60th. She's the youngest of 10. And so a lot of the older kids, they had their birthday parties, but she never received one. And so I wanted to make sure that it was as special as I could for my mom because she deserves it. She's thrown me plenty of parties in life. And so I just wanted to make sure that people showed up for her, and they did. I'm very, very happy my Aunt Terry came through. Like a lot of people just came through. I'm very happy my dad performed, my brother performed. And so I'm just really grateful that she got to experience her birthday party. And so think about it from my perspective. On the 11th, you got the whole crypto world hitting me up. Then on the 12th, you have to run all these miles, to then fly, to then see my aunt in a sad space. So on the 13th, taking care of my mom, making sure that went well. And then the 14th is the day before tax season. So I put in a 16-hour workday, which was expected. And then the 15th, I put in a 20-hour workday, which again is expected because, tax season, that's just how that is. I wouldn't have gone to California if it wasn't for my mom's 60th, but it's my mom's 60th, so I have to show up. And I let all my clients know well beforehand, make sure you send me stuff earlier because I may not be able to get to it because I'm not going to work on my mom's 60th birthday. And so most clients, they listen, some didn't. So it was still very, very busy last 2 days of tax season. And actually the IRS portal shut down the last couple hours. And so I wasn't able to finish everybody because the IRS portal shuts down. There's very little I can do. It did regain pretty quickly the next day, but by then I woke up and I heard about my aunt that I'd just seen a few days before. She passed away. So rest in peace, my Aunt Pat. That was a very sad moment. And so I went to go see her. I saw her while she was still laying in bed, even though she had transitioned. I saw my baby cousin. That made me really sad because she's normally very happy. And so then all of a sudden I had to deal with emotions. But it's difficult for me to deal with emotions when I'm in tax season because taxes are very analytical. There's no emotion attached at all. And with inertia, meaning I'm still focused on the taxes, even though it's over, it was hard for me to get out of that. And so I didn't have any time to process anything because I was still stuck in tax mode. And so, after seeing her passed away, hearing the news, seeing my cousin, then I had to fly back to Richmond. And, that was just a wild time. Between October 11th to 16th was just really wild. And so we flash forward to the rest of the month, from then all the way up to the marathon, the crypto space, people kept talking about it all the way up until election time. And now you're seeing it. Bitcoin skyrocketed, XRP skyrocketed. All these cryptos are going up because Trump has championed the crypto community in such a way that people are feeling extremely bullish. Companies are going crazy. This year, it was $245 million from crypto companies that went to politics for this year's election. The number one industry donor in the entire country was crypto, more than APAC, more than any other industry. And so, when I follow the money, that's my job. And so when I see that, I'm like, wow, that's why this election turned out the way it was. That's why people are confused, because that's not tied to a location. It's not tied to a state. However, these crypto companies definitely hit certain states, especially Georgia. Stand With Crypto did a very good job with, bringing the crypto education to Georgia. And so I have all that stress. Black women have been triggered because they saw themselves in Kamala Harris. There was a lot of hope that was given to them. And through that entire time, when they hear about the crypto community not supporting her, when they hear about my analytics and just telling the truth, they're triggered. So I have a lot of people who are being triggered by the things I'm saying, even though I'm just providing analytical data, which is my job. I always do that. I treat people like executives. If you don't like the information I'm presenting you, you're still supposed to soak it in and make decisions based off of that, because I follow the money. Regardless of whether you like what I hear or not, you shouldn't be mad at me. You should not be triggered by me. However, a lot of people are triggered, and I had to deal with that. And that was very, very stressful. On top of taxes, a lot of people did not send me this stuff on time. Some people sent me late stuff. And so then I have to try to take care of that. But also now I am preparing for my aunt's funeral. And so they had two funerals for her, one in California, which I could not attend, and a second one in Virginia. And so I had people, mostly family, staying at my apartment. So I had to clean up thoroughly because, I'm a guy. My apartment is pretty clean, but, not comparison to auntie standards and cousin standards. Like, you got to do it right. And like I said, most of my family are women, so I got to make sure it's, proper. Got to make sure the food in the fridge is packed, all that type of stuff. So that delayed things as well. And the funeral went well. I'm glad I got to grieve. But I think that through all of this process, the one thing that I've done is I've stayed sober through this process, because I felt like that was the right thing to do. All the stress, all the grieving, all the work that I was doing, I just did it sober. And so that was huge. And through that, that's why this episode is called Nearly 20 Years of Trauma, because I did not realize that I was holding on to trauma for that long. And so I recommend everybody go through some time periods of sobriety so that they can really sit with their emotions. It took some time to really feel all that was going on. I think mostly because I was dealing with the taxes and the stress from the crypto and the politics and all of that. However, I woke up and I realized one day, wow, you've been holding on to this. So almost 20 years ago, my cousin Nikki got murdered at point blank range with one shot to the forehead. I was 15 years old, and I had gotten a call from my dad on the walk to the high school gym with my baseball team. He didn't know all the details. He just let me know that she had been murdered and to let coaches, teachers know because there would be a funeral set at a later date. I was confused, so I was trying to piece things together. Like I said, my mom is the youngest of 10. My Aunt B is the oldest of 10, and Nikki was her oldest of 2. Colette was her younger sister, but both of them were around my mother's age. Their kids were my second cousins, but they were still older than me. You know what I mean? So that's I looked at my cousin Nikki as an aunt, even though she was a first cousin, because her kids were still older than me and they were my second cousins. And I knew that, a lot of my Aunt B's downline, they associated with, a lot of the blood gangs. And so at 15, I didn't really know how deep they were involved or how undeep. I just had no idea. I just knew that they were somewhat associated. And I assumed that the murder was gang affiliated. I had already to some degree been associated with the Crip side. And so every family function, they would laugh or start clowning because, I was the only one that was associated with the other side. Everybody else, they were more blood affiliated. And so I was hoping that my cousin's Nikki's murder was not like a gangbanging thing because I didn't want to be that isolated. I felt like those jokes might turn into real issues. I don't know how deep they are. I just didn't know. I knew they would know that it wasn't me personally. They would know it wasn't anybody I was hanging with. There's a distance factor and there's also family. My family's very tight. So I knew that. But at the same time, it was man, I really just hope that it wasn't gang affiliated. And so fast forward, I'm at the actual funeral. And remember, my family is enormous and we're very, very, very tight knit. And the way that my family was grieving, I knew that this was not a normal murder. I know I hate to say a normal murder, but this was the amount of trauma that was going on between my aunties and my cousins. I had never seen it before and I've never seen it since. And so I was whoa, what is really, really going on? I had never seen this before. People were crying like never before. And so after the funeral, I still hadn't known what was going on. And so I saw my second cousins, they were all smoking weed. And I knew deep down, my conscience knew to never, smoke weed or drink alcohol when grieving. But I really wanted to be with them and show them support in this moment because, these are my cousins and we're close and you know what I mean? I didn't want to be an outsider. I already didn't understand what was going on, but I just wanted to be there. But I knew nobody gave me any dirty looks. Nobody talked about black on black crime during the sermon. So, I knew that something was different. And so I looked at my big cousin right in the eyes and asked him what had happened. And he had told me that it was a white supremacist, I ain't going to say the word, but a white supremacist BI who had killed her neighbor in New Mexico, then drove all the way to California to kill 6 former coworkers before killing herself. And New Mexico is a state away from California. So that means she drove through New Mexico and through Arizona to get to California. And considering that it was a former coworker, she hadn't worked at the post office for 3 years. So what triggered her to kill her neighbor, drive from New Mexico through Arizona all the way up to California just to kill 6 former coworkers before killing herself? I was completely stuck. It was all making sense now, considering that everybody was bawling, crying, and how bad it was. To see the amount of grief on my aunties' faces, it all started to make sense. And I saw the complete stoicism from my cousin and my cousin's, my age as he hit, the blunt and passed to the next cousin. And so I had also been confused about, plans. You know what I mean? In my mind, if somebody kills somebody, you either have justice, you take it to the court system, you have revenge, you go after their family, or you have street justice, which can be a numerous of things. And so, I hadn't heard of any plan, so I was very confused. And it all started to make sense because she killed herself and her husband had already passed away. And she drove from New Mexico to California to go kill her coworkers from 3 years ago. She just went postal. So when anybody says going postal, that hits different with my family because that's literally what happened, and there was nobody to get revenge on. There was no justice to seek, and there was no street justice. We just literally had to sit with these feelings. There was nothing we could do. She killed herself, and her husband had already passed, and it was from New Mexico. Like, nobody was going to go all the way to New Mexico to do anything whatsoever. So, we just had to sit with the feelings. And so I remember I looked at the blunt, and at that moment, like, I had smoked before, but never like this. And so I hit it harder than I ever had before. And honestly, I got so high, I don't even remember anything else from the rest of the day, that night, or weekend. And I've never really gotten that high again. But fast forward 15 years later, March 31st, 2019, I was at my homegirl's house, and, I heard the news that, rapper Nipsey Hussle had been shot in front of his Marathon clothing store from TMZ. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, YG's been shot, Nipsey's good. Tupac got shot a bunch of times before he died. So, Nipsey's good. I mean, heck, even 50 and Game got shot. Nipsey's going to come around, and I just hope that he's the same. Hope there's no brain damage. 5 minutes later, TMZ reports rapper Nipsey Hussle, 33, pronounced dead. And so unknowingly, 4 or 5 stages of grief arrive. First is the denial. He's not dead. TMZ must be tripping. They just saying stuff. Then anger. Man, forget TMZ. Man, I'll beat them all up. Kanye don't fool with them either, Then more reports come out from different news outlets. And then it's like, man, like, who did this? Like, the bargaining stage of grief comes in. Like, who did this? And so I'm looking up flights from Houston to Cali. Like, like I said, like, are we going to get, justice, street justice, revenge? Like, what's the plan? And, I'm like, who did this? Was it government? Was it police? Was it Bloods? I'm ready to ride. One time Nipsey Hussle said in an interview with Charlemagne was that, if he dies, are you supposed to ride for him because he's a true black empowerment leader, period. Nothing less. Anybody who says that he's just a Crip or he's just a gangbanger, they don't really understand him. They don't understand the amount of positive impact he had in the community. The murder rate in LA decreased the lowest since gangbanging began before he passed away. And so, I'm over here bargaining. That's, the third stage of grief. And for people who don't know, like, everybody in my circle, like, knows that he was my favorite rapper for over 10 years. And I started working with him at his entrepreneur space in LA called Vector 90. He played an instrumental role in my success to this day. And so, my phone was absolutely blowing up with condolences. It was like a family member, basically. And so the streets was talking, and it was found out that it was, somebody from his own gang had killed him. And so in that moment, it was like, pause. Like, wow, there's nothing to do. There's no justice. There's no street justice. There's no revenge. Nothing that I can remotely do because he got killed by somebody in his own gang. And I have zero to do with this. You see, if it was like government, I would have been protesting. If it was, a blood out, it would have been like, okay, there might be some type of gang warfare. I wouldn't have gotten involved with that. But, the concept is, what's the next plan? There has to be some type of resolve to this. But when it's somebody from his own gang, it hits very different because it's like, there's nothing that I could do. And at that moment, you realize he was probably sent for. And, I'm not associated with, rolling 60s at all. So it's like, man, what do I do about this? There's no bargain. And so then when you realize there's no bargain, that's when depression hits. It's like, there's nothing I can do. And then you just have to accept it. You realize he prepared us for this. He had different lines in his songs, quote unquote, I'm going to die for my respect, quote unquote, I'm going to do it big till they can kill me, quote unquote, I'll probably die in the hood because of this. I'm dead up in the hood living like a rich, And so it's like, he knew what he was up against. He knew what he was doing. And he even said, like, somebody's got to die. It's just a part of gangbanging. And so, like, he already forecasted a lot of this stuff. And when you listen to Bullets Ain't Got No Names, Volume 1, he's got a song called Bullets Ain't Got No Names. And he literally walks you through on how his own gang kills people from their own set. And it's like a foreshadowing. So poetry it makes perfect sense, but in real life, it sucks. And so even when he says things like, he probably die alone, but his life's a poem, it makes sense because it's like he forecasted it. And so it was difficult to get through that because it put me in that same sunken place that I had with my cousin where it's like, there is no plan. There is no justice. There is no, street justice. Even though the guy who killed Nipsey gone to jail is, the him going to jail does not amount to losing the life of Nipsey. And with my cousin, she took her own life before taking my cousin's and then killed 6 other people, on top of her neighbor and herself. So 8 people died in that. And so it's like, man, that same feeling. And then the next year, Kobe dies. The next, like literally right after that, COVID happens. And so I never really got a chance to even grieve properly because it's like one thing after another after another. And see, in between my cousin Nikki and Nipsey passing, I had known maybe about 20 people who had been murdered, but COVID was just a different beast. In that time period alone, I knew about 30 people who had got murdered, murdered by else or committed suicide. And those aren't even including the ones who died of actual COVID. And so from March 31st, 2019 to June 2014, Juneteenth, I mourned Nipsey. That's over 5 years. And so the day that I was with We Off the Couch, they had put a picture of me thinking. This is July 17th. It was a picture of Juneteenth. I was processing how my dad's side of the family had a movie called The Last Slave Ship about the last slave ship that came to America from Africa. And that brought my dad's side of the family to America. And so one thing about my family history is we're very big on it. And so I know that both sides of my family actually escaped slavery. They both escaped it, within like 30, 40 years of slavery being over, but they both escaped slavery. And so I'm thinking about this on Juneteenth as I'm running on slave trail that actually brought slaves to America. Richmond, Virginia is the slave trade capital of the country. More slaves were sold in Richmond, Virginia than any other city. And so I'm thinking about this on Juneteenth. And you can check the picture that, We Off the Couch came on July 17th is literally what I was thinking about. That I'm about to go running on a former slave trail capital because I can, not out of necessity. And also that day, Kendrick Lamar's Pop-Out concert came out. And, for me, it was way more than a Drake diss. When Kendrick said, we've been effed up since Nipsey died, we've been effed up since Kobe died, it was like a huge relief. I could finally relax. I could finally rest, accepting that, the West Coast was in good hands and somebody actually understood what I was going through. Fast forward October 16th, when my aunt passed away, I'd already been sober for like 2-3 months. And, thank you to inspiration from Kendrick's Mother I Sober, as well as Tony Ross going completely sober. She's about 1,800 days sober now. And our fellow, We Off the Couch member, Chuck, I had decided to add weed to the sobriety list. So I'd already been sober for 2 months, not drinking, but I also added to add weed to the sobriety checklist. And so through celibacy, sobriety, I had to sit with these nearly 20 years of emotions that I didn't realize that I had. I've disliked the entire process, but it's helped me learn a lot about myself and has helped me connect the dots, including everything I just spoke about in this episode. And so I want to give a shout out to Ashley for inspiring me to run my first marathon last year, Taylor for being my first friend in the group and being so nice to me, even when my emotions were going haywire, Annie for being open enough to share her songs with me. It led me back to Kendrick, who has always helped me think introspectively. She had told me about a song with Isaiah Rashad. And even though that song didn't really resonate with me as much as it did with her, it actually directed me in the way to then re-listen to Kendrick Lamar's album, The Big Steppers, because that wasn't really like a banger album. And a lot of people consider it a failure, but he's going through therapy during that time. And so as I'm listening to the songs, I'm starting to connect a lot of dots. And I'm very grateful for Annie just telling me that because it allowed me to continuously, progress. And, therapy is good, but if your therapist isn't from where you're from, they don't understand certain things. They might be able to help you out with, overall concepts, but details. Sometimes you need to hear about things from somebody who understands what you're going through from your area and lived a similar lifestyle. And so Kendrick has helped me with that. Also, shout outs to Ebony and Coach Tay for listening to my emotions, even when they go crazy again. Shun for just being Shun. And big shout outs to Rock for making it all happen. We Up the Couch has been nothing besides a blessing to me. And so this marathon that I just ran, I let all of that go. I did, have a drink afterwards for celebrations, but I think that that's okay now because I've not only identified a lot of the issues, now I can work towards, progressively looking introspectively and doing the hard work on the inside. Me and Jade were talking about that at the actual after party after the marathon. And she was like, yeah, like it's real. Like you really have to sit with yourself and it's not fun. And I agree completely, but I'm just grateful for the entire team. And so I celebrated not only finishing the marathon, even though I didn't do nearly as well as I wanted with the time. One thing that my dad has always instilled with me, and it keeps me going, is that one, always put God first. I did that. I was sober. I went through the emotions. I took care of all business. Everything got taken care of. So I put God first. I've been going to church. I have not self-destructed. I haven't been indulging in toxic behaviors. So I put God first. Family comes second. And I took care of family. Not only did I take care of my mom for her 60th birthday, I saw my aunt before she passed away, told her I loved her. And I was there, after she passed away. And then I was there for the funeral. I brought in family members to my house, let them in, pick people up from the airport relentlessly. And so I took care of family. Third, my dad said education, which has evolved to business. I took care of tax season. I took care of all the work. Anybody who sent me stuff on time, everybody got taken care of. People who sent me stuff late, that was on them. I did give them a notification. Some of that stuff I still haven't got to because I've had other things going. But the people who sent me stuff on time, everything got taken care of. And then fourth was sports, which was always the thing that I enjoyed the most. But I always had to make sure I prioritized the others. That's why my dad gave me this list of priorities so that I didn't just put sports first. And so through all of that, I did not get good sleep from October 11th all the way up until the marathon. Even though I worked out, even though I took care of my body, I'm in the best shape of my life, but I've not gotten really good sleep because I did take care of my priorities. And that's why I am at peace with my time. Even though I'm very disappointed, I'm at peace because I took care of the priorities. And the disappointment, I can live with it because I'm at peace that I did everything that I was supposed to do. I would not change anything because I handled all my responsibilities. And so all that, to say is love your neighbor, right? The white supremacist who drove from New Mexico all the way to California, she literally owned a publication called The Racist Press. So not only was she racist, but she was encouraging others, and she spewed hate, and she sat with it. And one day she must have been triggered, killed her neighbor, drove from New Mexico all the way to California to kill 6 former coworkers that she hadn't worked with in over 3 years, and then killed herself. So love your neighbor, love people, don't spew hate. One thing I love about We Off the Couch, it's very diverse. White, black, Asian, Hispanic, none of that matters. We all love each other. We have one common theme, and that's running. But the community is so much deeper than that. And so love your neighbor, please. Love your neighbor, love yourself, love God, and love your running mates. People that you have things in common with. You never know what somebody's going through. I love you, Aunt Pat. I love you, Cousin Nikki. We miss you, Nip. CJ the Smart Guy. I'm out. Deuce.